Metro. Happy Earth Day, early Earth Day. I'm Dan Henkel. I'm a member here at Metro Baptist and spouse of the pastor, one of the pastors. Yes. I've been chosen to speak on what we call the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project and how it started, and then I'll reflect on what it means to our congregation and our community as we celebrate Earth Day and the care of God's creation. As many of you know, the leaders of Metro Baptist Church and this congregation have always asked, how can we use every square foot of this building in a way that answers God's call and honors our mission and serves the needs of our community? Well, 15 years ago, that question was specifically asked about the roof of this building, which at that time was just a roof. And the answer came from a group of partners who were already meeting around the issue of food insecurity. And the group included folks from Metro Baptist Church, RMM, Metropolitan Community Church, and Clinton Housing. And they said, let's grow things. The skeptics laughed, and that was me. How the heck are we going to do that? There's no railing. The roof wasn't made for that type of use. It might not even be strong enough. There's no elevator. How will we get enough dirt or any dirt up there? And on and on. There were more questions than answers, but the group stuck to the idea and rather quickly found a United Way grant to cover the cost of a new railing, a pro bono structural engineer to determine how much weight the roof could handle, and then the best part, 60 volunteers showed up to carry bucket brigade style 7 metric tons of soil to fill 50 kiddie pools with just enough growing medium to get the growing started. Is Kathy here? No. She was on that bucket brigade. She was bucket number 12, I think. Done. Farm started. Not so fast, said the original residents of the roof, pigeons 1 through 500, and with great thanksgiving, they devoured the entirety of our first crop. By this point, the farm was led by a small group of core volunteers and staff, including me, Tiffany, Alan Schraus, Anthony Reuter, Betty McIntosh, Shanti Nagel, our very own Bob Bear, and a few even weirder folks that thought all this was way too cool to stay away. The group convened and decided to try a myriad of responses to this unforeseen pigeon problem. Cayenne pepper, oil effigies, scarecrows made of old socks, red and sparkly ribbons tied to stakes. Nothing worked. The pigeons kept figuring out our schemes. Down but not out, the group figured if you can keep chickens in a coop, there must be a way to keep pigeons out of the kiddie pools. And if you've been up there, the solution is quite visible. Wire cages and netting, and it works. Now in its 14th growing season, with years of experience, lots of passionate volunteers, and the expertise of various food justice coordinators like Chrisaleen, the farm produces almost 500 pounds of fresh produce each season, food that goes out the door in the hands of our neighbors that don't always have access to fresh produce. And food is not the only thing growing up there. The farm is host to classrooms of kids that don't usually get to see food growing. The farm is a place where corporate groups bring their staff to share the importance of volunteerism. And most importantly, the farm is a special place where nature is celebrated, where bees, worms, bugs, birds, and humans can touch, smell, and be nourished by a small piece of God's creation in a city that doesn't take many opportunities to do so. And while the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project has answered so many questions, there are many more questions that arise from growing things on a roof. Like, can this be done on more roofs? Can we grow more on this roof? Why do so many people not have access to fresh produce? How do we reach and teach more city kids to want to grow things? How can we advocate for more creation care in our community? And where's the dang elevator? Many of these questions just lead to more questions, so maybe it's best today to celebrate the answers that have already been found and to praise God for the many blessings and for the many who have been and continue to be blessed by the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project. And may these blessings be proof that caring for God's creation, even on a small patch on a city church roof, is exactly what we are called to do as members of the body of Christ. And finally, I'd like to end on these words from a novelist, poet, environmental activist, and farmer, among other things, Wendell Berry, as this could easily be considered Hell's Kitchen Farm Project motto. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Ask the questions that have no answers. Put your faith in 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Laugh. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. Practice resurrection.
Good morning, Metro. I'm going to read a poem for us called East of Eden by Reverend Sarah Speed. I live somewhere east of Eden. It is beautiful, but not complete. There are children that play and laugh and sing, music that moves me, sunsets that undo me. The spring is green, the rain is sweet, but this is not where we're meant to be. And we know that, but we're quick to forget because well-intentioned people can always slip. But I don't want to forget. I don't want to think that daisies in the sidewalk are the same as a garden. I don't want to believe a cup of tap water's the same as the ocean. I don't want to imagine that this is the way that racism and climate change are just part of the day. I don't want to forget that this somewhere east of Eden home that we've built is not the place we're meant to be. It's not the dream we're meant to dream. So every night as I fall asleep, I pray, God, wake me up, a restoration plea. Don't let me confuse a little bit of rain for your downpour of grace, or a little bit of progress for the end of the race. And until heaven's on earth, that's what I'll pray. For I live somewhere east of Eden. Don't let me forget.
Good morning, Metro family. Some pre-Earth Day reflections for you. Vivian Sansour is a Palestinian seed keeper. Her life's work is preserving the heirloom seed varieties that carry the genetic information necessary to preserve biodiversity in her native Palestine. On her website, she writes, part of the Fertile Crescent, Palestine has been considered one of the world's centers of biodiversity, particularly for wheat and barley. This biodiversity, which has kept us alive for millennia, is being threatened by policies that target farmers and force them to give up their heirloom seeds and adopt new varieties. Heirlooms, which have been carefully selected by our ancestors and passed down from family to family throughout generations, throughout thousands of years of research and imagination, form one of the last strongholds of resistance to the privatization of our life source, the seed. I listened to an interview with Vivian while I was making the HKFP seed order for this season. The interview took place in November 2023, and in it, Vivian acknowledges that it might seem like a little bit of a strange time to talk about seeds. Amid the rampant destruction and violence her people are facing, it might seem odd to talk about seeds when there are powerful forces determined to destroy Gaza until there is nothing left, when they are determined to bury her people under the rubble. But still, she insists, I am just as much in love with seeds as ever. She's inspired by the seed who gave its life to become a gourd that might one day feed a family. She explains that at the Palestinian Seed Library, which she manages, they save their seeds in ash. People come to the library and ask, why are your seeds gray? Now, she says, it's hard not to look at those seeds and think of her people, and not think of her people. Emerging under the rubble of oppression and state violence and genocidal intent, faces covered in ash and dust, and yet still alive. There is no saving seeds without death. This is the work of seed saving. It's the decision to preserve something, to not participate in its full abundance, in the hope that someone coming after you, who you might never meet, will get to enjoy it. This radical hope that doesn't just look beyond death, but acknowledges it as part of the process of liberation, to me is a convicting example of what it means to walk in faith. In our tradition, we worship a God who underwent death to offer us a new way of life. It is that same radical redemptive hope that we are asked to take on in this time of climate crisis. Climate scientists say that even if we stopped producing carbon emissions tomorrow, there will still be a lot of death and suffering in our lifetimes. That dying has already begun. In 2019, we lost nearly 3 billion animals from wildfires in Australia. During the heat dome on the West Coast in 2021, approximately 700 people died from hyperthermia, which is basically the opposite of hypothermia, in my home province of British Columbia. In the 2022 flooding in Pakistan, which submerged nearly a third of the country, it is estimated to have killed over 1,700 people. I could go on. Of course, this death and suffering is disproportionately visited upon those who already suffer from the inequality that exists in our world. So-called frontline communities, those communities facing the worst impacts of pollution and environmental degradation because of extractive industry, are disproportionately likely to be Black, Brown, and Indigenous. The Bronx, which has much higher rates of childhood asthma and the highest rate of death and disease from asthma in the country because of poor air quality, is a frontline community. During the 2021 heat dome, many of those who died were Asian elders who lived alone. I think of many of our food pantry clients when I'm reminded of that. And yet, despite how bleak everything might seem from this temporal vantage point, we cannot lose hope that on the other side of this cycle of dying is new life. We are at a critical point where interventions are still possible, where there is still potential for us to demand that our leaders divest from extractive industries that are reproducing mass death. These fights, fueled by hope for new life, vary dramatically in size and scale. Some local, all in some way global, and some hyper local. As many of you know, our rooftop farm might be entering a cycle of dying of its own. Though our problems are radically different in scale to the cruelty faced by Palestinian farmers and seed keepers, or farmers around the developing world facing droughts, reduced yields, increased pressure from pests and disease due to climate change, we're also facing a threat to our ability to grow food in our community here at the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project. The Port Authority redesign threatens to steal our sunshine. For a farm, a place where we harness plants' miraculous ability to transform the sun's rays into energy and then into something that is both pleasant and nourishing for humans to enjoy, that's an existential threat. And instead of throwing up our hands and allowing our operations to decay, we're getting to work. Under Tiffany's leadership, we're having conversations with our committed volunteers and elected officials. We're figuring out how to use this opportunity to reimagine the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project. We want the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project to be a multi-generational effort. We want some version of it to exist to serve future generations of Hell's Kitchen residents. We're doing the hard work, even if we might not get to be the ones to enjoy the reward. But we also know we need to be honest about what's coming. Part of what Hell's Kitchen Farm Project looks like right now might have to die or change so that we can usher in new beginnings. At the risk of belaboring this metaphor, we need to figure out how our rooftop farm can become a seed. And so, my friends, I invite you to think about all the cycles of death and living that made our lives together possible. Beginning with the dying stars that exploded over 1 billion years ago, spreading cosmic dust that would become the basic building blocks of our bodies, to the millions of plants and living beings that have nourished us throughout our lives, to the small seed that gave its life to become a zucchini. I invite you to think about the beliefs, ideals, petty gripes, and habits that might be laid to rest before you can experience new life. I invite you to think about how our society's fidelity to capitalism, to borders, to carcerality, to extraction has taken us out of right relationship with the earth, and what might need to die so that we can restore it. And in the more immediate now, I invite you to help me start our zucchini seedlings for the 2024 season. This year, we're privileged to be growing a Palestinian variety of kusa, which is the Arabic word for squash, and I'll be hanging out at the back of the sanctuary after the service, and you can come see me and plant a seed. Thank you.